And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time it is you are listening to this. I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to go ahead and download it and listen to it. I know there's a million podcasts out there and you could be listening to something else, but you're listening to my voice. So thank you. Thank you for that. Today is episode 20, which means, of course, you can find the show notes at homesteadsandhomeschools.com/020. My guest today is Kayla Fox. Kayla was a homeschool student and, she went on to college and she got her master's and now she's doing some PhD work. And we talked a little bit today about, some of the transitional things, some of the things that, she sees in college. And, this was an interesting little interview with Kayla. Had a good time and, hope you will too. And after the show, I will blather on about some homeschool happenings up in the fine state of Kentucky. Things that have to do with truancy. And I think that's all for now. So after the show, I will remind you of all the things I need you to do, like supporting the show through Patreon, patreon.com/the Liberty Hippie, or joining the Facebook group, the Homestead and Homeschool forum, or liking us on Facebook. But I'll remind you at the end of the show. All right, so let's get out there. Let's go plant those Liberty seeds with Miss Kayla Fox.
My mistakes lay like embers on your tongue. In the foreground, you're still busy getting young, singing.
Today, my guest is Miss Kayla Fox. She is was a homeschool student. I guess is a homeschool student. I don't know. Is that something that sticks with you? I'm not sure. But she was a homeschool student growing up and went on to college and did her master's work. And so she's here today and she's going to share a little bit of her experience with us. So thank you for coming on, Kayla. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, how long were you homeschooled for?
Most of my school life before college, I started at the beginning of third grade, and I was homeschooled from then on out, except for a few random days in high school where my parents gave me the option to try public school if I wanted to, and after a few days, I decided I would stick to being homeschooled. So pretty much most of my life before college.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in a very small town in Texas called Pineland. It's less than 1,000 people. One of those little small towns surrounded by other small towns.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how long did you go to public school for then?
Kindergarten through second grade, and then those just few days in high school.
Do you remember any of it?
Yes, actually, I do remember bits and pieces. I remember all of the teachers I had. I remember some of the friends I have. I mean, I have some distinct memories, and my family sometimes talked about my experience in public school versus not. So a little. Yeah.
Well, is it something you remember fondly? Or, I mean, I feel like, at that age, for the most part, school it's not horrible yet. I mean, it has its moments, but I think,
Yeah, my memories of public school are pretty neutral for the most part. The ones that I remember, I do know my mom said that part of the reason they decided to homeschool me was that sometimes I might be upset because I might be bored in class because I was a little bit ahead and whatever. And it was a first grade teacher that actually recommended that I be homeschooled because of that. But that was interesting. But nothing strongly positive or negative sticks out.
Yeah.
Too much about those few years.
That's a good thing, I guess, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's like I wasn't scarred for life, but there's nothing I feel too attached to with it.
That's nice. So how did your parents kind of tackle that? Were you the first one, or do you have siblings that were homeschooled, or?
I do have an older brother, but he was not homeschooled because they didn't decide to homeschool me until he was nearly done with school because he's a full 8 years ahead of me. So it would have been kind of pointless for him at that point. I did have some cousins who were homeschooled, so the idea wasn't completely foreign to them. Mm-hmm. but they didn't really decide to do that until I was a kid.
So who ended up doing most of the teaching? Your mom?
It was pretty much all my mom. Like she would order textbooks from a few different curriculums. And we'd go from there, and some things we'd do outside of that. But my dad was a pipeline welder, and he worked away from home a lot. So it was mostly her with everything.
Yeah. That's I don't know. Could be rough. So I guess she kind of used the box curriculums a little bit, or did she just, how did she do that? Do you know? I mean,
we did use some curriculum, a lot from Abeka and stuff, different textbooks. We tried a few different types and would kind of use that as a base and go from there. Sometimes we might incorporate other books. There were some points, like especially with religious curriculum, where, I think one of the books I had was like so fundamentalist that it condemned music that wasn't classical or something. And we were like, okay, this is kind of BS. So it wasn't without question, but we did kind of use curriculum as a base. And then, sometimes we'd branch from that.
Yeah. So was that a important role in your school then? The Christian aspect of it, that part of things, was that part of the decision? Was that something that just was incorporated in it?
Both. My family was a Christian family, so it was incorporated, but that wasn't like their primary reason for homeschooling, and it wasn't something I wasn't allowed to question or anything. So it was a bit of both.
Yeah.
It was a point that was incorporated and discussed, but it wasn't like forced or anything.
Yeah. Now, I guess as you got older into middle school and stuff like that, what did you do for social stuff? You had cousins that were homeschooled. Did you hang out with them? Were you able to, I don't know, travel sports, or, how did you?
I wasn't actually that interested in sports. A lot of people in my area was. I wasn't, at least not playing them. I did watch a lot of local baseball games here and there, and sometimes I'd socialize with friends there. Most of my friends were in public school. Some I had become friends with in those few early years, right, in kindergarten and so forth, and I kept in touch with. Some I met later on through those friends. Since my family was religious, I was sometimes involved in church youth groups. As long as I wanted to go, again, that was never anything that was forced. Yeah. If there was any local events I could go to, I spent quite a bit of time on online forums and stuff too. So, it wasn't completely closed off. Since it was a small town, I wasn't necessarily part of any homeschool kids group or anything, but there's still some interaction.
Yeah. When did you graduate high school? Out of curiosity.
2009.
Okay.
2009.
Okay. So you were, you were probably in like the beginning of middle school. All right. So yeah, the internet was probably, going pretty well when you were getting to that age where you could explore those sort of things then, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. I can't really remember a time we didn't have internet, but I can remember we only had dial-up until I was about 12 or 13 with the area we lived in. And that's kind of an interesting point to bring up and look back on, because the internet was a part of things I could research on, stuff I could look up. There was message boards and stuff, but being able to learn anything you wanted on YouTube or Khan Academy wasn't completely a thing yet until my later teens. Okay. So
yeah, because it's still sort of the early years of it. But yeah, I think 'cause that's something, you think about, and homeschooling now, it's just so much, you have that gift, you have that internet right there for you, and you can find whatever you want. And, I'm remembering I wasn't homeschooled, but I remember using like Encarta CDs.
Yes, I had those.
It was just, it's like, kids, and it was just so, I don't know. You think about what we have now and what information is accessible now. It's miles apart,
Definitely. I was actually thinking about that after you invited me on this podcast. So, because one of the things I was thinking about, did I miss out on much being homeschooled? And I was like, well, not so much being homeschooled, but the isolated area I was in had limitations on what you can learn. And I look back and I'm like, whoa, most of the things I would have been interested in back then that I may not have had access to, I would now on the internet. So
yeah. No, it's huge. It's grown huge. And if you were homeschooled in the 80s, you didn't have any of that, and night and day difference of the experience kids have these days. Like my kids are in elementary school kind of now, we homeschool them, but they're at that age, and it's all right there. They can use Khan Academy. They can, look on YouTube and try to figure things out and meet up with friends and all this stuff. It's just, it's nice.
It's great. I mean, that means life is getting better for homeschools. I mean, if you have a tablet with internet access, you have everything you need right there.
Yeah, no joke. But so, all right. And now when you got into middle school and high school, started getting into some more of the, the more specific curriculums, doing, biology or physics, chemistry, that sort of stuff. Was your mom still sort of in charge of that, or did you spend more time either at the library or on the internet trying to figure it out? Or,
I mean, it was still mostly her with some help from the internet. We didn't really look at too many outside resources other than internet textbooks, basically what we had available easily. Which, I mean, it still worked out.
Yeah. Did you take any, when you got into high school, did you do any like dual enrollment type stuff with local colleges, or did you just kind of stick to your high school curriculum? Or
we pretty much stuck to the high school curriculum. We didn't attempt dual enrollment. My brother did keep trying to get me to try community college before going on for my degree, especially with me being homeschooled. He thought it might be easier, but I just went straight from being a homeschooled high school student to a university and went fine. So,
yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So what was that like? Where did you go to college then?
It was a school called Stephen F. Austin State University. It's a school of about 13,000 students. Most people who go there, well, I guess not most, but it's more known to churn out teachers and nurses than anything. Most people haven't heard of it. Like I said, there was a few years ago where the men's basketball team did well enough to get some recognition. But it's in a small town called Nacogdoches, Texas. Nothing glamorous, but it was still a 4-year university. And that transition was much easier than anyone in my life thought it would be. So
yeah, it seems because I mean, I don't know. You get this stereotypical image of this little homeschool kid that's not exposed to any of the gnashing of teeth that is life and the cruel world out there, and you're just gonna get eaten alive. But at the same time, I imagine. I mean, you're still here. You're still doing it. So, I mean, how did it go? How was it?
It went better than anyone expected. I was kind of a shy kid, and then on top of being homeschooled, no one knew if I could handle the social aspect. People questioned whether or not my mom was really qualified to teach me well, because she herself did not have a college education or anything. So a lot of people were wondering how college was going to go for me, but I think homeschooling actually gave me a big leg up, because one thing in homeschool is you learn how to study on your own.
Right. And
that's something a lot of people from public schools who might have been top of their class without ever really studying struggle with.
Yeah.
And the thing is with college, a lot of people who went to the college I did were from Dallas or Houston or bigger places. They were more likely to have things in common with me in terms of similar interests. So, I mean, I made friends quickly, got involved in stuff quickly, did well academically. Like, it was a few semesters in before I even got my first B.
Nice. Nice.
I surpassed expectations on that, and like I said, I think homeschool really helped prepare me for that better than many people anticipated.
Yeah. So your mother did not have a college education. She just stopped at high school, I guess, then, or just kind of...
Yeah, she'd started a program to become an LVN. So just a small nurses program, but she didn't finish it, didn't continue with that. She ended up becoming a stay-at-home mom, which was good with the way my dad worked often so much. So having one parent there 24/7 for everything when the other one might be gone for a few weeks or months and then home again was a pretty good balance.
No, it is. And it's always curious to see, because we put so much stress on college degrees sometimes, and your mother didn't have one, and she seemed to do just fine getting you through, your high school and got to college and did well, and just an interesting aside, I guess. But
yeah, it is interesting.
well, because it's so much. I don't know. I think one of the comments you get as a homeschool parent, and you saw it as a homeschool kid, is that well your teacher was not prepared to educate you. Well, when your kids get to high school, you're not going to be able to teach them chemistry. What are you going to do? You can't do that. And to see examples of that, examples of people that might not be well versed in a particular field, or haven't gone to school to be a teacher, to learn whatever that is. It's nice. It's refreshing. But anyway, yeah. So you went to college, and how was that getting into college? What was that process like? Was there any? Because you didn't have. I mean, I get you graduated, but it's like a homeschool diploma, I guess. Or did you get like an accredited degree through a Becca, or how did that work?
Yeah, there was no accreditation. One thing, so the way we handled it is throughout my homeschooling time, my mom did order these standardized tests every year for us to do. The abbreviations were CAT, so we called it the CAT test, but I don't remember what those letters stood for. But it kind of would compare my performance on those tests to kids in public school by grade level. And typically I had like post-high school scores by the time I was in junior high. And then before I was admitted to college, when I was applying, we formed a transcript of what courses I took, what grades, so on and so forth. And I did take both the ACT and an SAT like anyone going to college from public school would, because, I mean, you do not have to be involved in public school to register for those tests. Right. I know for me, it might have been easier that I didn't really shop around for college as much. I basically picked somewhere close to home. That was my decision then. Obviously, I didn't stick to that criteria for my advanced degrees. I moved across the country instead. But for undergraduate, that was basically my base.
And when you fill out an application and they ask for your high school or whatever, what would you just write homeschool on there and
pretty much?
How does that go?
Pretty much, I just wrote homeschool on there. I think in the past, like when I was still being homeschooled and on the early applications, we might have put the Fox Academy or something, like we picked that as a name. But now if I do a job application or college education and for some reason high school comes up, I just put homeschooled, which a lot of times it's not really relevant since I do have degrees now from colleges. I don't think anyone really cares about high school anymore. I don't think even people look at it like when I was in the PhD program here, I can remember my advisor being shocked whenever she found out I was homeschooled. And by that point, it was late in the spring semester at a conference. So,
oh man. So, and I guess none of the, admissions didn't question you at all, or didn't look into you further and see was she really homeschooled? Did she really do this? I mean, I guess the tests spoke for themselves, or
yeah. I mean, it seems like my ACT scores and SAT scores were enough. I mean, it might have helped that I lived in Texas, and from my understanding of various homeschool laws, Texas is fairly loose compared to some states. But yeah, there was never really a hitch.
Good deal. That's nice. That's nice, because that's one of those things that I won't say that like I'm afraid of it necessarily. I think homeschool is becoming a more accepted practice. What it is. It's one of those things in the back of your head. If my kid wants to go to college, how is this going to work? Is this going to hinder them at some point?
Yeah, I found that it hasn't really hindered me in terms of the bureaucratic aspect of simply getting admitted into things and so on. and I wouldn't say it's hindered me at all, really. It does lead to some interesting social conversations, be it with professors or other students, where they'll express surprise or something, or ask about your experience, or you may contradict the stereotype they have in their head, and you get to see their response to that. So those moments can be a little awkward. I can't say I've ever felt hindered by it, but it does get interesting. And then especially after someone finds out you're homeschooled and they like try to say something against homeschooling, but then they look at you and they know you're going to say something and they're like, well, you're an exception. I'm like, I don't think you can really say I'm an exception. Do you have any other data points?
Yeah. Have you run into that? People that are kind of slag off the homeschool?
I've had more people surprised than anything. And after they get past the surprise, they might say my mom did a good job or whatever, or they might go with the idea that I was an exception and that that's not normally the way it turns out. I'm not really sure what they base this on.
Yeah.
I did have one professor who said the exact opposite when he found out I was homeschooled. He's like, well, you'll probably do better in this class than everyone else. There was this other student who acted really offended by it. And he was like, I'm just speaking about statistics.
That's great. All right. So, and then you did your master's work and started on some PhD stuff. Is that right?
Yes, I had completed my master's degree in history at Utah State. And then I'd started a PhD in history here, and I put a year into it, and I did well, objectively speaking, and ended up with a decent GPA. Professor still offering me to write me recommendation letters, even though I didn't finish. But I just decided that history wasn't necessarily the field for me, and that I wasn't sure I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to that. So,
looking back at some of your homeschool experience, your transition into college and going forward, I mean, is there anything that you think you missed out on with homeschool, or homeschool didn't provide you, or?
Not particularly. There were times I used to question it, especially when I was a teenager, on certain things on the social aspect and stuff. But the more older I get and the more I look back at hindsight and what was available in that area, I don't think that homeschooling was really the issue there so much as living in an isolated place where you have to go 40 minutes to get to a mall. Like, there's nothing that the local schools would have provided me that I could have learned to do some of the things I was interested in. Like, I would have been interested in art classes and martial arts instead of any other sports, or learning to play an instrument that wasn't necessarily related to a band. And all of these things are things now you can like look at tutorials for or something. That's basically, the internet hadn't come far along then at my time being homeschooled to be beneficial, but I don't think being in public school would have made a ton of difference there. I think there was basically more benefits than drawbacks.
That's positive. I mean, so what are some of the big positives you think as you kind of step back and?
The biggest thing is, well, number one is, I mentioned this earlier, is being able to study for myself and self-motivate on that without being in the classroom for 8 hours a day and having a set amount of homework and a set schedule and stuff like that. Because in college, and especially grad school, you have to do a lot of work on your own and in your own time. And a lot of people flounder figuring that out, even if they do great in school. I mean, I know people who are valedictorians and salutatorians who didn't know how to adjust in that sense. And since homeschool was already so self-motivated and self-scheduled, that was easy for me. Like, we would sometimes, pause on schoolwork a while to do various house projects, or if my dad was home, we might be a bit more lax then and then double up after. So, working at our own pace was a given. And also, like I said, focusing more on learning how to do something instead of learning a specific thing to adhere to help. I was always encouraged to question everything, which meant I didn't, a lot of people will complain about professors trying to brainwash students. Professors laugh at that idea. Other students will worry about professors pressuring them to believe something. And I know from what I saw in college, a lot of times, like, a student would think they had to believe something because a professor did, when most of the time the professors wanted to get them to provide evidence for what they believed or ask them questions, and other people didn't necessarily get that. So
I think so. I think that's like, one of the differences between public school at this point and homeschooling is that homeschoolers, you're kind of on the fringe already, and you're willing to question some of those things, and you're willing to really sit down and think about how I arrived to this belief or this idea. And public school, you're just kind of fed on a platter what you need to learn to pass the test, and you don't really think about the whys of how you got there. It's just know this fact and accept it. And I think it's interesting what you said about college. That professors just kind of are. It sounds like they're almost searching for you to defend your belief, or to like you said, provide evidence for it, as opposed to putting that belief on you.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times people interpret it as them trying to impose a belief, when no, they want you to defend it. And if you have questions for them, then that forces them to defend their position. Sometimes they like that. I mean, I'm not going to speak for every single professor, but generally,
well, yeah,
it went like that. And there's a couple other points I thought of when you were talking. Another benefit to homeschool is peer pressure, like an overwhelming need to follow the majority of your friends isn't something I had to deal with every day. Like, I saw friends often enough to enjoy their company, but I never felt pressured to change my opinion or interests to adapt to them. And I think that part of what helps with that is I didn't have to deal with their criticism on a daily basis. Like, as a kid and teen, I was more into video games and anime than most people in my area. I can't think of any girls in my area who were into that kind of stuff. They actually, like, if you get them one-on-one, they might say they were, but like in a group, they were kind of ashamed to even act like they knew anything about it. And I think a lot of that was peer pressure. You're uncool if you like these things. And, I could just like what I liked without any worry about it. And that was
do you think, do you think when, like, because you didn't have some of that pushback, that, oh, that's nerdy stuff. That's not cool. Do you think you kind of, when you got to college by that point, you had solidified enough of your self-worth or self-confidence that some of those things didn't matter? Did you feel some of that peer pressure when you got to college, or do you think you were more stabilized in yourself because you didn't face that so much in high school?
I think I was pretty stabilized because I didn't have to deal with that before college. And then at college, it was easier to find people with those interests.
Okay.
Because they came from different places. I think the very first day of college, I wore a Fruits Basket t-shirt and I got like 3 comments about it. Most people in my hometown wouldn't know what Fruits Basket was. So if anything, it made me solid enough to be, proud of my interests, which made it easier to make friends with similar interests, which meant that by that point, peer pressure was pretty much obsolete. It just didn't matter, which is great.
Yeah. That's one of those things, it's, for me, it's one of those things, I look at and peer pressure is, to some degree, I think it's probably a good thing because it teaches you how to stand up for yourself, how to kind of, sort yourself out amongst other people. At the same time, it can be a really bad thing. It can be, not good, at all. I've seen it at times. And so it's one of those, where does it fall? How much is a good thing?
Yeah. And that's a tricky question. I don't really know the answer to, because like I said, I did not have to deal with that much of it, or at least if I did, it didn't faze me much because I didn't have to deal with it continuously.
So what's the plan then for the rest of school? Do you think are you going to try to switch fields? Are you kind of moving on, or?
I'm very likely going into a philosophy PhD program. I didn't expect much from applications and got acceptances. I am kind of just being tentative with that at the moment because I don't want to end up in exactly the same situation I was with history. Philosophy was my other major for my bachelor's, and the field I'm more interested in. So at this point, I'm kind of just see how it goes because my ideal was to be a college professor, and I do like the humanities. I love reading and writing and editing, and all of that. Like, there is a reason I seek PhD programs, but there is a part of me that's like, are there other options? So, I spent some time evaluating what I liked about academia, what I didn't, and at this point, that is the role I currently plan on going, but I'm not. People don't encourage you to be waffly on whether or not you go into academia. They want you all in or not. But I'm in that whole, I have my feet in. I know I can do it. I'm open to other options too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a floundering point in life, but there's lots of possibilities out there. And one thing is, since homeschooling, I actually think homeschooling is helpful in this route too, because you kind of learn to love learning. So if that means getting outside of the box, so to speak, and self-learning something new altogether, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it does. It forces you to learn that. You have to learn how to educate yourself. How to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing, lifelong process. And maybe it keeps me in a PhD program to being a professor or something, or maybe it takes me down a different route altogether.
Yeah, good deal. So you appreciated the homeschool. If you ever have kids, you think you'd homeschool them, or would you send them to a public school? You think?
I definitely think homeschooling has a lot of benefits that I appreciate that I had, and it'd be great for my kids to have that. But for me, whether or not I homeschool my kids will depend on a few factors, like my situation and my individual children, because me and my mom actually talked about this the other day, how even though, part of the reason I was homeschooled is public school's not for everyone, but the reverse can also be true, because she points out she's not sure my brother would have flourished in homeschool as well as me. I think the entire reason homeschooling is a good idea is because there's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning. Right. Which is why public school is not great for everyone, but there are some kids that are going to thrive in it. So should I ever have children, which I hope to one day, I'll make that decision based on, am I in a position in life where I can homeschool them? Do they have personalities that I think will be more adept to homeschooling than not? Will I be in a position in my life where I feel comfortable homeschooling them? Because I'm not going to lie, sometimes I wonder how my mom did it, because I'm not as much of a homebody, which homeschooling doesn't have to mean being at home all the time. There are parks, there are museums, there are other options. You can get creative with it, and that's one thing that is exciting about the possibility, especially with technology and transportation being what they are, and the possibility of living different places. It could be a very flexible thing. So we'll see.
It is. It's an interesting, thing to think about, really. Education, like you said, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and one kid might do really well with something like unschooling, and another kid's going to need, something really rigid, and maybe that's a classroom with 20 other kids. Who knows?
Yes, exactly. Everyone has different learning styles and personalities, and should I ever have children, I will want to keep that at the forefront. What's good for them as individuals.
Yeah. It's one of those things, man. We have 4 of them, and they're all different. They're all different. And who knows? There are days when you wonder what you're doing. Why would we choose to do this? You have 2 people working, and the house would be clean, but all right. I'll appreciate the time. And any any parting words of advice or anything we didn't get to that you think is important or noteworthy or that you want to share?
I think if someone's considering homeschooling, they should definitely reach out to people who have homeschooled to talk about their experiences. And similarly with grad school, if someone has been homeschooled in the past and they're curious about college or grad school, reach out to someone who's been there. And get like a variety of experiences. Don't get locked into thinking that one person's experience is represented for all, because that's where kind of some of the stereotypes about homeschooling come in. And I think everyone's story is different, and you can kind of choose how to apply it to your own life.
Yeah, we've all come up different. We've all experienced different things, and yes, I think that's part of why I'm trying to do this, is just, hear different stories and you can relate to different things. You can take different parts out and make your own story with it. Take your own experience out of it.
Yes, exactly.
But all right, thank you. Is there I don't know, do you have any website that you keep updated with your work or anything like that you want people to go check out? Or
not at the moment. Not at the moment. One day we'll see. But not right now.
All right.
Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll let you know as it goes by. Do you love freedom? Do you love songs? Do you want to love all 365 days in a year? If you're anything like me, the simple answer is yes, and Freedom Song 365 can deliver all of these things. When you sign up for Freedom Song 365, you will receive an email every day that delves into the different ways freedom and liberty are messaged in a massive catalog of music. Each message is carefully crafted into easily consumable paragraphs that give you the necessary information to share with your friends. I've been receiving Freedom Song 365 emails every day of 2019, and I've yet to be disappointed. But really, why should I be? With the fabulous minds of Nikki P. from the Sounds Like Liberty podcast, my guest from episode 4, Sherry Voluntary, and the wonderful Luke Tatum of the Culture of Peace podcast, there's more brain power utilized in the creation of each individual Freedom Song 365 email than is proffered in a whole day at any DMV across the country. Head on over to freedomsong365.com and sign up today to start receiving your daily emails of musical integrity. Use the promo code Homestead and you'll receive 15% off this superb service. Again, that's freedomsong365.com, promo code Homestead for 15% off. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I think that transition from homeschool to college is an interesting one. And I'm trying to get a hold of some other folks that have made that transition or who help homeschool students to make that transition. It is probably one of the bigger transitions in life any student will make. And so I think it's a curious one to talk about at the very least. I mentioned at the top of the show that I was going to be talking about truancy. So, what is truancy? Really, truancy is just a student knowingly not going to school. It's unexcused absences, right? And I think to really understand truancy, you have to ask why a student would choose to be truant. If I'm enjoying something, am I going to miss it? If something tickles my curiosity, am I going to ignore it and not participate in it? If I'm scared of something, am I going to throw myself into it every day? There's a bunch of reasons why kids don't go to school. It can be from anything from, their home life that's completely removed from school, but, mom and dad work late and kid stays up late taking care of younger siblings and they're not able to get up in time for school. Maybe school just isn't the right place for some of these kids. And so they just don't go. And that's kind of their choice to make. And sometimes a parent will see this, they'll see that a child is truant, and they may pull them out and decide to homeschool them. That's their choice. That's the parent's choice to do. Sometimes it probably is just to get the authority figures off your back about why your student is truant, why your child is not showing up to school. Because believe it or not, that can raise some other issues, right? You start getting the cops involved, you start getting CPS involved. Why? Because a kid is not showing up to school. So you pull them out and you decide to homeschool them. And homeschooling looks like many different things. It can be a box curriculum where you sit down and you do 4 hours of work every day, 6 hours of work every day. It can be, this radical unschooling stuff that, kids are kind of self-directed and they will learn things on their own. The title of this article is Kentucky Lawmakers Consider Homeschooling Law Changes Aimed at Truants. So they want to pass some laws that will prevent truant students from being pulled out of school and enrolled in a homeschool program. Why do they care? Of course, the article says that they're concerned that these kids are not getting an education, that parents are just doing this to avoid legal consequences of truancy. That's right out of the report. And they want to make it easier for the state arm to get involved when kids get pulled out in the middle of the year. They already have laws on the books in Kentucky that is a best practices homeschooling document, which is an agreement between parents and school officials that gives pupil personnel directors the ability to investigate homeschools when red flags are raised, such as removal of a child from public school in the middle of the academic year. So they already have these sort of red flag school laws on the books, which again is equally as scary. If I want to pull my child out and homeschool them, that's really up to me. Of course, you can hear it now, all the terrified grandmothers and the sincere and caring politicians. And, what are these truant kids doing all day? They must be just sitting around and getting high and stealing things from the local grocery store, and maybe they're knocking over a liquor store, and they're just getting drunk and rowdy all day and causing problems. And, and maybe some of them are. But why? Why are they sitting around being lazy and doing nothing? Why aren't they allowed to be productive members of society? Because there's laws on the books that don't allow them to go out there and to work. There's rules. OSHA says that they can't work. Why? Because they're supposed to be in school. Even if they're homeschooled, doesn't matter. A child that is enrolled in school, homeschool or public school, cannot work during school hours. So these kids that school is not their forte, that are being pulled out to homeschool in some unschooling manner that they're learning from life experiences rather than a textbook, they're not allowed to work. Why can't we look at truant kids that come out? Why isn't it some sort of vocational homeschool program? Little Billy's school wasn't a good fit for him. And he was truant all the time, so we pulled him out, and he was able to find a job with the plumber down the road. And he got an apprenticeship with the electrician up the street. Why is that not okay? Why can't they work there? Why can't little Johnny that's 15 years old, 16 years old, why can't he start working at the grocery store during the day? Let him get some experience there, and who knows where he might go. He might be a shift leader, might be a manager. He might, get his stuff in gear and go to school to become some sort of business manager. But they can't. They can't work during the day. They have to find a job at night, which is fine. You can find some jobs at night. But the more valuable jobs, the more trade jobs, they're not necessarily going to be there. They're not as plentiful. There's a problem with that. That's a problem. And, yeah, sure. Okay. So they're not actually, doing a homeschool program. So they need to just drop out of school anyway. So they can't get their high school diploma because they're not actually learning. They're just going to work. Who really cares? What is a high school diploma worth? What is the value in a high school diploma? And what job am I going to get because I have a high school diploma? Not many, right? I mean, now I might be precluded from some jobs because I don't have a high school diploma, but having the high school diploma is not what's going to get me the job. Let these truant kids come out. Let them go to work. You know, what are you going to do? You're going to pass these laws. You're going to force these kids to go to school somehow. You're going to show up to their house. You're going to put them in the back of a squad car and drive them to school. And what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to sit there in class. They're going to be obnoxious. They're going to disrupt the class. They're not going to learn anything. They're going to make the teacher's job harder. They're going to make the other students' jobs harder. It's going to be harder to learn when you got kids that don't want to learn there. And what? They're going to sit there and do nothing. If they're already not going because they don't want to do it, forcing them to be there will not make them do it. Politicians don't get that, I guess, right? We just want they just like the shiny thing. They just like the shiny words that make it look like they are doing something because they care. They care about the kids. They just want those kids to get a good education, a well-rounded education, one that you can't get in the real world, one that you can only get in 4 cement walls, some tile, and fluorescent lights. Anyway, that's my little spiel for today. I'll post the article in the show notes, of course, and you can go check it out if you want. But like I said, if you like the show, want to support the show, you can do that. Patreon.com/Liberty Hippie. Go leave a review on iTunes. Hit that like button on Facebook. The group that has been set up, the Homestead and Homeschool forum, I'm the admin for the group, and Facebook apparently had my notifications set to like none, so I wasn't getting any notifications of that group. Don't ask me how or why. You would think that being the admin of that group, you would get all the notifications, but I was not. So now that I am, hopefully I will be more aware of what is happening there. So go join that, and enjoy the rest of your day or the rest of your evening or whatever it is. Next week I will have that food preservation interview that I did with Mr. Sandor Katz. So that's all for now. Get out there, go sow those seeds of liberty. We can all reap sheaves of freedom together.
I'm gonna ride us this dream.